Hey, everybody, welcome to today's webinar. This is our final webinar of our spring season. We'll be taking a little break through May. Glad you guys could all join us to discuss pollinator plants today. Definitely a fun topic to end on before we take our break. For those of you who are new to this program, welcome. We're glad to have you. And for those of you who have attended before, thanks as always for joining us. We have Peg with us again today to discuss pollinator plants. And before we get started, I'm just going to go over a couple of notes for those of you who are new. This is a Zoom webinar program. It's not like the Zoom meetings that many of you have probably attended over the past couple of years. We can't actually see you or hear you. So during this class, if you have a question, click on the Q&A button on your Zoom menu and type those questions into that box. And when you submit it, then I'll be able to see that and give it to Peg as she's able to take questions. We often get more questions than we can answer during the class. So if we don't get to you, don't worry about that. We still want to answer your question. You can hit reply on our confirmation emails, and you can send us any questions that you have that don't get answered or that you think of later, and I will share those emails with Peg. We are recording this class today. We will be sending out a copy of the recording as well as a coupon tomorrow. And as always, as I usually do with Peg's class, I will be trying to type out some of these plant names for you, and then we'll be sending out a handout following the class. I can't promise to get all the perennials right away, especially if we have perennials today, but I will do the best I can. So I think that about covers it. Peg, I want to go ahead and turn it over to you. As always, thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you, Sally, and good afternoon to all of you that are with us today. I'm frequently asked, what is your favorite flower? And my answer is usually the one I'm standing in front of. However, when it comes to topics, this could possibly be one of my favorite topics. The birds, bees, and butterflies is such an important part of our lives. When you think of pollinators and doing the things in our vegetables and our farms and so forth, we have destroyed the environment for a lot of these things with so much development in our cities. But thank goodness we have a lot of people now that are realizing how important it is to put as much of that back into place as possible. And so I may be showing you and talking to you about a larger area because my area is large, but I would like to talk to you as I go along as to what you can do on a balcony, on a deck, or in a townhouse back garden, okay? So you want to grab your hat. We've got some sunny weather. Grab your gloves, and these, of course, are my fox gloves, which those of you who were watching last week saw little Clara struggling with getting her gloves on. I will often talk to you about my favorite tools, and I've actually, my Velcros, I won't need those here today, but I will be using my Joyce chins because these flowers often need deadheading to have them continuously bloom. Hopefully most of them will bloom until frost takes them out. And by deadheading, you can keep them going. Their greatest ambition, particularly for the annuals, is to reproduce, to produce that seed. And if you constantly are discouraging that, then they will constantly bloom. So it takes a little bit of work to do that. I'm going to introduce another. Kelly, can you, it's a little cumbersome. Can you hand me that? Okay, I'm going to add something to my repertoire because this is a shovel that I use almost constantly. Yes, there are tasks that require a big shovel, but in my opinion, everybody that gardens needs to have what I've always called a lady's shovel. You can see if I place my hand here that the size of this is 1/3 of the size of the big one. And the beauty of this is it gets into those perennial borders, into tight spaces, and does a great job of digging a deeper hole. Something that you would use a big shovel for, this one is much more efficient with those spaces. Now, Kelly, if you put that back, okay. So one of the first things that I'm interested in as I'm thinking about this planting is the first picture that I will bring up, and that is a hummingbird. Everybody loves the hummingbirds, and they're really coming in now. I actually have not yet seen one. They're probably there. Haven't seen one in the garden, but I can sit on my front porch with my cup of coffee and watch these hummingbirds come to feed, particularly in the morning or in the evening is a wonderful time. And I have planted things in containers particularly, but also in the ground, where I can watch these hummingbirds. It is beneficial if you put up a feeder also, but you have got to keep it clean. And that means a couple of times a week, taking it down and cleaning it. And sometimes I'm not really good about giving it that kind of time. And so I concentrate much more heavily on the plants that are in the garden. So if we come back to me, Kelly, I want to talk to you because we're talking about pollinator plants. This group of plants is some that I am incredibly fascinated with. I have always been fascinated, but now, today, both in the annuals and in the perennials section, there are so many cultivars of salvia, S-A-L-V-I-A, from the perennials to the annuals. And there's some new varieties. I have always enjoyed the perennial salvia. This one is Blue Hill, so it's been around for a while, and it's very, very dependable. It has information as to approximate height. As far as these plants are concerned, they require sunshine. They require a minimum of 6 full hours, 6 to 8 hours of sunshine. And I have proven that over and over again because there's 2 or 3 areas where I grow them that get no more than 6 or 7 hours of sun per day. This particular salvia, perennial now, remember, is wonderful when you deadhead. Knowing how and where to deadhead is important. Obviously, there are no finished blossoms on this, but rather than just snipping the tippy top out, I will go back to this area and cut it because the next blooms will come here. Okay, so you want to cut it back to the next set of leaves rather than just taking it right off the top. Okay, so that's a neat one. Let's see. This is another one that's new to me. Okay, it's called Fashionista. Fashionista. That's quite a name. Fashionista Midnight Marble. I have not grown this one, okay? But I love the blossoms on it. They're quite large. And here again, you're going to have them in all bloom stages here. And this one, when it's finished, you'll come all the way back and snip that out, okay? To keep it going. There's a couple of brand new ones on the market, okay? This one is called Marcus. Isn't that incredible bloom? And this one is low growing, very low growing. So you can do it in the front of the border easily. And it will get yay high and yay wide. Another small one that is a perennial, we're still in the perennial section here now. Okay, is one that has become quite popular because it's more a dwarf form also that blooms all season if you keep it deadheaded. And it's called, this will be easy for you to remember, Cat's pajamas. Cat's pajamas. Napita. Okay, it's great. Napita. So salvia, that Napita crept in there because it looks so much like a salvia. All right, on this side are the annuals. And we have an entire section here at the Fair Oaks location anyway, of annual salvias. And I used a lot of these last year in those containers because I wanted to trial several of them. And it's fantastic. I change up those containers periodically. There's a new series. Proven Winner has come out with these series, and it's called Rockin'. R-O-C-K-I-N. Rockin' Fuchsia. It's not a fuchsia, it is a salvia, okay? But these get large, okay? This particular, it always gives you information on the back. If we try to be here to help you, but sometimes if we're really busy, maybe not. This says 24 to 36 inches, and believe me, it may look small now, but by the end of the season, it will be 2.5 to 3 feet tall, and it will bloom continuously again if you deadhead. So that entire series, the Rockin' series, okay? Here is another absolute favorite from that area, not necessarily new, and that's called Mystic Spires. Mystic Spires will certainly get 2 to 2.5 feet tall. So you need a large container for these if you do it in containers. They're great to do in borders also. And it doesn't matter. I know that they say hummingbirds come to the red, and they certainly do. But believe me, they came to the blue, they came to the purple also. And I saw no major difference. So you could, with Mystic Spires, plant some petunias or something that also attracts them in the edges and let this big guy grow up if you're doing a container or in the garden. And then there are other smaller ones. This one is interesting, and it's probably only 14 to 18 inches. So it's called Cathedral. This is Cathedral Deep Blue Annual Salvia, okay? And there's another one here. And this one, I have to look because they're so similar. This one is Sally Fun, Deep Ocean. So just go to the annuals section and you'll find all of these plants, or to the perennial section, usually somewhat grouped together. This one has a tendency to perennial. Now this is Rockin' Blue Suede Shoes, but there's one that's similar to this that can almost be perennial, but it's very interesting flower. I don't know if you can actually see that carefully enough, but it's very interesting, and believe me, the hummingbirds love it. But this one is the Rockin' series, will get 2.5 to 3 feet tall with ease. Okay, another interesting thing when we're talking about pollinators and plants that attract, if we go to the next one, we watched a couple of years ago in the annual section this wonderful phenomenon of the monarch in the chrysalis. That chrysalis is absolutely beautiful. That little ring of beads that looks like there is actually gold, and above that it's almost a softest of turquoise. And in the next picture you'll see where it is coming out. We watched the actual coming out of this. It was wonderful. We really protected this so that nothing could get it, you know. And in the final picture, it's really sunning itself before it actually flies. And so we're anxious to have these, to give them a corridor. Hopefully they use a corridor from one garden to the other, or they come and they stay in your garden, okay? So there are certain things like butterfly weed, Asclepias, that they will feed on. but they'll also lay their caterpillars on. And others, for the swallowtails that I love, parsley, dill, fennel in your vegetable garden are absolutely incredible. Now, if we go to the next one, what is it really that draws these birds, bees, and butterflies, all of our pollinators? It's diversity wherever possible. Now, as I said to you earlier, my garden is a large garden, and I feature it because that's where I live, that's where I garden, that's where I trial plants. Granted, I cannot trial them all, but I do try as many as I can, okay, so that I can give information that is as correct as possible, realizing that everybody's garden is different and that there are microclimates within your own garden, even if it's quite small. Even in a townhouse back garden, you may have a wonderful dogwood, and it's going to be shady in that area and a little more protected perhaps from the wind. And the other side of that, you may have more sunshine, just particularly depending upon whether you have a fence or not. So all of these things are required. It isn't just the pollinator plants. The birds, bees, and butterflies require other things to eat. And so I have the large oaks, the large tulip poplars, the big trees that attract because they have insects that these birds particularly love to eat. But if you've got a small garden, a townhouse back garden, you can't have those things. They're too big for that area. But you can step down to the understory trees. You can step down to the dogwood because they also have fruit that the birds come and eat, okay? And we think in terms of certain things as pollinators, but it's amazing. The birds flatten from one thing to another too. So we can't just separate that out. So it is this diversity within the garden to the degree that you can that helps provide a habitat for all these beneficials that we really need to protect to the best of our ability. So trees and shrubs provide nesting, shelter, often just food. It's amazing. I'm not going to say too much about this because I'm afraid it might change. I don't use chemicals within the garden, or very few, okay? I'm very careful about doing that because of the beneficials. I don't want to kill them. And I really have had very few problems with the insects, those that are not beneficial, because it is a haven for all of those birds, particularly to eat those insects. And if you don't have insects, they may move over to your neighbor's yard, you know? So anyway, in the next one, I have to include Clara in all of my programs because I cannot believe the extent to which this child loves a garden. She's only 3.5. So she's taking a walk with her mother out into the garden. And I invite you to join us in that walk. This is a section, you want to know where you plant these as well. If you have a townhouse, let's reduce that somewhat. It's got evergreens that bloom, camellias, it has some azaleas, and there's a holly in the background. And then between that background and the bulbs that you see blooming, there are a lot of other plants that are interesting. There are daylilies in the shadier section, although daylilies need some sun too. There are hosta back there where it gets more shade. And there are a few other perennials that have a lot of interest. And then I planted a row of different types of daffodils. And their bloom time varied. And so one of the first color shows was the bulbs. And they too bring the beneficials. But they bloomed over a period of time because there was different varieties. Now, these were the larger growing daffodils, not the dwarf ones, not the miniature ones. And they are planted in the center of that border for a reason. Because I love them right now, and I'm going to hate them in the next 2 weeks because all of that big foliage has to turn brown before that bulb matures for next year. And if those bulbs were up in the front of that border, it would not be so attractive. They are in a situation where all I do is slightly bend some of them over and tuck in some of these annual salvia, okay? I use annuals there along beside those bulbs because the perennials can't really compete too heavily with the foliage. In front of those bulbs at the moment, you're seeing in the shadier side a perennial native geranium that is just beginning to come into bloom. And next to that, a native phlox, which is in bloom at that same time. Those are wonderful attractants that bloom only in the spring. But this is a continuous flow of things that are in bloom. And if you've got a small space, you need to think about what do you need to plant in that space that will give you some continuity, first for some diversity, and then some continuity of bloom. At the border front, there are, at the moment, violas and alyssum. The violas, when it gets really, really hot, they'll go well into June. Then I have other things that seed into that area, or I will grow some of the shorter salvias. And you know what else is good? Basil. Some of the basils have wonderful, wonderful flowers that are very attractive to the birds, bees, and butterflies. So in the next picture, you're getting a view of what it looks like today. Actually, I think I took that when the rain stopped on Sunday. And you can see that the bulbs have gone out of bloom, but you can see there's enough depth there that that foliage is not interfering with the things that are in front of it. There are a number of salvias there. There's some of this nepeta. I'm trying that cat's meow to see just what it's going to do. There is some dianthus there. A lot of interest, a lot going on in that particular area. Now, you could also feed the birds, and I absolutely love to feed the birds. I am adding back a finch feeder because I was at my son and daughter-in-law's on Sunday, and they had so many finches coming, and it was to the finch feeder. She has several feeders, and I really did enjoy that. So if we come back to me for just a minute, I really do. I enjoy watching those birds up close. When I'm on the porch in the morning, in the early morning particularly, there's just a cacophony of noises from the birds. I wish that I could tell you I can identify every one of them. Sometimes I can look them up, as do butterflies, okay? But I absolutely enjoy them. Okay, I do want you to come back to the pictures because this next picture does show, the next one, Ben. Yes, this is the top of that rocking series of salvia. You can see this is an area that gets 6 to 7 hours of direct sun. And it was adequate for this thing to bloom really well. These I sort of had to the back because they got so big that it eventually was difficult for me to weave my way through them to keep them watered, okay? So they were fantastic. I'm going to only do 1 or 2 of those this year, in addition to some of the other things that I'm going to suggest to you for lower growing things for containers. But I am going to plant these larger ones out in the garden, okay? Now, yeah, another beneficial. I do get to see these every now and then, but more than anything else, I get to hear them. And I was amazed at this one. It just sat there as if it were posing for me. And I really walked almost right up to it. But I am so appreciative of this because I know that this little guy is helping with the mice and helping with the voles and helping with all those things I need help with. All right, let's do the next one first, because this will give you an overview of an area that I really want to talk to you a little seriously about. This is a much larger section, but let's face it, if you have a small yard, it could be 6 or 8 feet that has some of these different things in it, okay? Now, this is a very relaxed area. In a formal area, you might choose different plants, okay? In this particular picture, it is one small section of a very steep bank of a retention pond that borders my property. And it was very difficult for the people to mow. And so I turned it, with permission, into a bird bee and butterfly garden. What you are seeing in that small section, which is probably, that picture is maybe 10 feet, maybe a little more. But it contains echinacea, the daisy that you see there, which is wonderful for pollinators, but also for the birds. And the finches love it. They love the seeds. Soon the yarrow will come into bloom, and that's the taller growing yarrow. It's the one that you can cut, and it dries very naturally with its color. So I enjoy cutting some things from this garden, as well as having it there for the birds, bees, and butterflies. But that yarrow blooms for a long period of time. And then if you leave some of the seeds heads up dry, then the birds come and collect the seeds from that. Another one that definitely you need to get rid of some of the babies that it throws, because it does reseed, is fennel. And there's the dark fennel and the green fennel. And I love to munch on that. And I put no sprays in this area except the Bobex to keep the deer from eating things. And you don't, I avoid the fennel because the deer don't eat the fennel anyway. Because if you spray it with Bobex, you don't want to eat it either, okay? But that has a beautiful flower on it. And I've discovered that you can also cut it for arrangements, and it's long lasting. So all of these flowers are good, multi-purpose. They're pollinator plants. They're plants that feed the birds, they feed the bees. You can cut them to dry. You can cut them for fresh arrangements. How can you beat that, you know? All right, we'll come back to me just for a minute, okay? Complementary plants, okay? Could be, I brought one up, cosmos. I want to talk to you a little bit about seeding, okay? Cosmos are annuals, and usually they get 2.5 plus, up to 3 feet, possibly tall, and they'll bloom for a very long period of time. Would be fun to put in just a few plants, and then to possibly plant some seeds every now and then, because they come pretty quickly. Another one, again, is Gara. This is a This is a perennial. This cosmos is an annual, which will sometimes reseed, certainly grows well from and quickly from seeds. This one is Gara. It is a perennial. And they're different tones, deep tones even of pink. This one is almost white, okay? Blooms the entire season. You don't necessarily have to deadhead it, but I found that if you do, it will bloom heavier. This actually is all seed pods now. And so that I would go all the way back to new growth on the side and snip that off with my Georgetown scissors. Do that every now and then. It'll stay tidier. It'll stay a little smaller. It'll bloom a lot more. Gaura, G-A-U-R-A, okay? Now, here is another one that is really good, and it's called Azuratum. This is an annual. All right, I'm bouncing around here. This one is a perennial, and it's a baby. This one will get at least 2.5 feet tall. It's called on this little tag Anise Hyssop, Rosy Posy, but it's truly an agastache, A-G-A-S-T-A-E-C-H-E, A-G-A-S-T-A-C-H-E, agastache. But I love the foliage color on that also. It also comes with a golden type foliage, which I have in my garden, okay? Another real beneficial to put into this is Monarda. Now, Monarda has quite a reputation. It is definitely a pollinator attractant. Oh my goodness. It's often called bee-balm. Monarda, M-O-N-A-R-D-A, Monarda. This one has some really interesting foliage too. Some of the older varieties can get a little mildew on them, but you can trim that away, and oftentimes they'll rebloom even. But the reputation comes from the fact that this clump sends out runners. So you will periodically have to pull away some of those runners if you don't want too big a clump or don't want this to take over. But it's such a worthwhile plant. It's worth that effort, okay? Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about the annuals later. Let's come back to this bank. So those are some things that could be added to that bank. We'll go to the next picture, Kelly. All right, this one, this one is the next one. This one is larkspur. It's an annual or biennial. Often it will come up from seed in the fall, live over winter, and bloom beautifully in the spring. And along with that is one called feverfew. Its proper name is Matricaria, M-A-T-R-I-C-A-R-I-A, feverfew. And we do, I think we have it right now, but we don't have it all the time. And it comes quickly from seeds. Mine just seeds all over the place. Fortunately, it's very easy to pull up, so I don't dislike it, okay? I love it. Has a long period of bloom, and again, if you deadhead, even longer period of bloom. And those that are little babies right now in the garden will bloom later. And so this is a continuity of bloom. And I think that it's a nice companion for that larkspur. The larkspur will certainly get 2.5 to 3 feet tall easily. And I have to definitely protect it. We're going to talk in a few minutes about some maintenance, but first we're going to see some more beautiful plants. The next one in line. So I'm looking at sections of this bank, and you can see that it is a long bank. I'm not even going to guess how long it would be. It's probably at least 75 feet, I want to say 100 feet of this planting, most of which are perennials, but there's one big section that I'm very dependent upon, biennials, those that come up in the fall, live over winter, bloom in the spring. What you're seeing in this picture in the center is the cosmos in bloom. Behind that is the butterfly bush. Again, if you deadhead that on that butterfly bush, it blooms for a long time. But the bright flower that you see in front is a Rudbeckia, Rudbeckia, Rudbeckia hirta. They're different types of Rudbeckia, different cultivars. And this one is not totally perennial, but comes heavily from seed. And it can have a different appearance too. Some may be solid yellow, some the ones that you see here, and others slightly different coloration. Wonderful attractants, long blooming, great cut flower. And with that, I think shows better perhaps in the next picture. You're seeing up close, and you're seeing, this is that whole section where I have the biennials and the seeding going on. Verbena bonariensis. My daughter calls it Verbena on a stick. So this is not the vining verbena. And we do carry it in the perennial section, and it does seed, but it's not obnoxious. It isn't hard to get it up, okay? I only consider seeding obnoxious when it's difficult to remove. And to some degree that fits fennel because it has a tap root and it's more difficult to get it out. But this Verbena bonariensis blooms for a long period of time. Excellent cut flower. Wonderful, wonderful pollinator. And within that picture also are zinnias. I love the zinnias. They are fantastic. And the butterflies love them too. And there are petunias. Let's continue pretty quickly so I can cover some of this territory. On that same bank, I have a long line of lavender. And I think the only reason I've succeeded with this, because I think lavender is very demanding about growing it. They do not like wet feet. They like excellent drainage. And so this is at the top of that bank where I know it really drains well. And with that is probably one of the most popular monarch plants, and that's the butterfly weed. This one is tuberosa, but there are other varieties now, and we do have them in the perennial and in the annual section. Blooming there in the nice yellow. I love the contrast of gray in the garden. It's Santolina, and it is in bloom. And after it goes out of bloom, as well as after that first flush of bloom from the lavender, you want to shear it back. You can grab handfuls of it even with your Joyce chins and clip it back into the tippy top of the foliage. That will actually cause it to rebloom in the fall, the lavender particularly, but it will also thicken up that plant and keep it dense. Okay. Can't beat echinacea. Wonderful, wonderful. I deadhead some to keep it going, and then I stopped deadheading in August and let those heads stay because the finches love them. And some of the small grasses are included here. I don't have very few of the big ones, okay? This one is a pennisetum, and I have a few of those because I love the contrast, and the birds love the seeds too. Okay, love the goldfinches. So to continue this display and to be sure you have continuous bloom, it's always good if you can to include some of those plants that bloom best in late summer, early fall. And often I call them my H plants, the Helenium, Helianthus, Helianthus, Helianthus. And of course you can't, you need to have sunflowers wherever possible. Okay, this is something I really want to cover in this program. I read quite a bit because I like to know what the rest of the world's doing, horticulturally speaking. Well, otherwise too matter. Maintenance. This is something you just don't read much about, and that is how to take care of these pollinator gardens. There are some magnificent ones planted in Chicago, I'm thinking, in several big botanical gardens or areas like New York. I'm thinking of some of those. But they have so many volunteers helping to keep them weeded, helping to keep them maintained. Well, I get some help every now and then, but I am the gardener. And so I have to concentrate on keeping the maintenance down as much as possible. This is a big area. And so within all of this area, except the one section where I definitely want things reseeded. Now, this is how I do it differently. Hopefully you can see in this picture that there's newspaper. I put down 4 or 5 layers of newspaper, and then I put mulch on top of it. In this, normally the mulch that I use is Virginia Fines. I like that pine bark mulch. But in this particular area, it is a steep bank, and that mulch will wash. And so I step up to the pine bark, the Rappahannock, and I cover that so it does not wash as much. Okay, this threaded hardwood would not wash as much either. Okay, so this is between, I do it at this time of year because there are a lot of bulbs in there also, and I want to know where they are because I do not want to mulch on top of them. That would kill them. So this is the time of the year that I go in, I put down that newspaper, and I put the mulch on top of it. Okay, so that's how I deal with certain areas. It allows me to make pockets to go back in and plant my cosmos or plant my zinnias or plant the plants or seed the plants into small spaces. It's easy to cut through that wet newspaper and pull the mulch back and tuck something in, and then pull the mulch back around it. So that's a lot of the maintenance that I do there. And in the next picture, hopefully this will clarify a little bit. That is a mass of another type of salvia that blooms a little later. And it's mulched around it, but you can see there's also some topsoil, some of our bagged topsoil that I will work into that small space where I'm going to plant a cosmos or two, a zinnia or two. And I'm going to do that sporadically throughout that area. Okay, so that is how I deal with that particular, let me see, Kelly, not yet. That's how I deal with that. Unfortunately, I did not put in the picture of the area that I showed you where there's larkspur, the feverfew, the zinnias, the rudbeckia. In that area, there's also a petunia that reseeds itself that actually came from my mother's garden many, many years ago, and I've kept it going. It trails, and I love it, and it seeds there. There's also poppies, but I want those things to reseed, and so I cannot heavily mulch that area. I can mulch it better right now when those plants are up and growing, except where I'm going to go back and put in some seeds. I can mulch it right now. But first, I have to get some weeds out because I didn't have enough mulch down there to keep those weeds out. Why? because I want those plants to reseed. And if I multi-petal, they would not reseed well. So that's the different treatment that I have for primarily the perennials, making areas where I can go and tuck in those annuals. And then in the other section, it's different, okay? So just a couple of fun things. The zinnias with the fritillary butterfly. And then, of course, many of you have the next little beauty, okay? And they're out there right now. And that is Bambi. And how do you deal with Bambi, okay? We come back to me here. I spray with Bovex. I don't have a fence to keep them out, except in the vegetable garden, because you can't spray your vegetables with this. The rain doesn't wash it off, but in the spring, when all my lilies are coming and all the hostas are coming, I spray every 2 or 3 weeks, because that new growth will outgrow sometimes the flavor. Some people also use liquid fence. Bobex has done it for me, so I've stuck with it, but I certainly know people who've had success with liquid fence also. And there is one that's specifically for rabbits, if you've got rabbits. Okay, I want to tell you quickly about 2 things that are very important for me. One is, yesterday, in a bucket of standing water, and as much as I have, I'm always with some standing water, there were mosquito babies in it, and you can see them flitting around. And I thought, uh-oh, it's time for the mosquito bits. This you can even use in bird baths, because it does not harm the birds, but it kills the larvae of the mosquitoes. And so I put out basins, attractive basins. It could even be a wash tub, you know, with water in it, because they go to water to lay. And if every 2 or 3 weeks you put a few mosquito bits in, it immediately kills the larvae. But it won't hurt the children, and it won't hurt the birds, bees, and butterflies. Very important. Okay, I'm in the woods. I have a lot of leaf litter, which I leave because it's good. It's healthy for the woods anyway. I use DEET, and that's a powerful thing. But a lot of the milder things don't work for me. But I do not put it on my skin. I wear long pants when I'm out gardening, even when it's hot, never shorts, okay? I spray my pants. I spray my shirt, and I spray my hat. And that usually takes care of them. So I have DEET on hand, because I don't want the ticks on me, okay? Absolutely do not. So those are 2 very important products. I did not have the opportunity, because I would like to take just a few questions. Here is one more plant that I've got to tell you about, because this is just so incredibly popular. It's just, again, it's a proven winner, so you're going to pay a little bit more for it. It's called Vermilion Air, and it is a fuchsia. We have another fuchsia, and this one accepts a lot of shade. These are 2 of the hummingbird's absolute favorite plants, and both will accept some shade. Match that up with a lot of these beautiful annuals that they love. They love the petunias. They love the calabricoa. They absolutely love the lantana. All those fun things. So, Sally, we'll have time for just a little bit of questions.
Excellent. All right, we've got questions coming in. So just a reminder to everybody, if we don't get to your question today, feel free to hit reply that email with your confirmation details after the class. You can send that. That goes directly to me. So I'll forward that to Peg, or if you need to speak to a member of our plant clinic or someone else, then I'll forward you to them. Okay, Peg, so the first question is back to the shovel. What is the brand of shovel that you showed?
Seymour. Seymour. And I picked the one that I felt looked the sturdiest, okay, because mine are ancient. I've had them such a long time. But this one is Seymour, Seymour.
All
Yes.
right, thank you so much. Okay, next question. Do you know specifically, I know you mentioned the echinacea was a native, I think you mentioned that was a native, and the native geranium. Are there any other notable native plants that you discussed today or that you would suggest to people who want to plant native?
Well,
Pollen?
I would research that and come up with a list of those things because that was not foremost in my mind. I have a great many native plants on my property that I didn't even plant. They were already there or that I've added to. I love native plants, but I'm not, I like the cultivars also.
Yeah,
I have birds, bees, butterflies, so many things that do come to my cultivars because I can see them there. I have these salvias behind me here. Fantastic. I know that the Monarchs are, I'm not sure about some of the other things. A lot of the
so some of
petunias
these are
and
natives and then some are cultivars of natives.
right, yeah.
Yeah,
And plus, I've got a lot of what they're calling exotics too, which
yeah,
I loved. I have my azaleas. They come to those. Well, they're obviously not native, but
yeah.
I cannot be, I can't
Oh
just.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I know we mentioned some. We've got someone coming in here. The Monardo, the butterfly weed, the yarrow, all of those.
Yes.
Um, yeah, so if anybody's interested in that, feel free to send us an email. We can get you some more lists or get you to a couple of our specialists who talk specifically about natives. We have, I mean, there's tons of them and Peg listed a lot. It's just that's a whole other topic in and of itself, which is a great topic. It's important.
It is, absolutely. I love them. I've got so many, my oaks, my tulip poplars, my dogwood, my redbud, high bush blueberry. I could just go on and on and on with all
Yeah.
the natives that I have. But as far as I am quite sure the petunias are not, alyssum is not, lantana is not, but I
Yeah.
got to have it.
Yeah, that's what we have probably, we'll hopefully be having a class in July where Caitlin comes in and does her native class. All right, next question. We have a person on the call who is planting containers for their neighbor across the street. He wants pollinator plants, but he needs one that he doesn't have to water all that often. So they're going to be in containers. So do you have any suggestions of pollinator plants that are highly drought tolerant?
Well, in the summertime, uh, in containers, it's difficult because your container is going to dry out much faster than the soil. One thing that comes to mind is sedum autumn joy, or cultivars of that. And they bloom beautifully and they really draw the bees and all that. And they are drought tolerant. Does that mean in a container that you don't have to water them? No, they will still need water. And so there are some, as I said, that's the first one that comes to my mind because it borders on being called a succulent, okay? Any of the succulent type things, but it is a good pollinator plant, okay? So you might try a cedar, okay?
Yeah, those are, I actually had some of those on my front porch a couple years ago, and they were like a magnet for all of that stuff. That's a great suggestion.
Portulaca is an annual, which would trail out from that.
Okay, portulaca as well. All right, let me write that down for everybody. Okay, next question. Should we deadhead Fleabane? Did you mention Fleabane?
Fleabane? No, I did not mention Fleabane. And it's really strange, but I have never grown Fleabane.
Okay, okay.
Strongly feel you probably should deadhead it,
All right. Next question. For the topsoil that you showed, what does that do in addition, so you said you were using topsoil. What are you using that topsoil for? She said she knows what does it do rather than mulch compost. Is that what you were using it for, or?
Well, actually, that small amount, every time I plant a plant, I usually use leaf grow. In that circumstances, I tried, this is our bagged topsoil called topsoil, and it's not clay, okay? It's a combination of products. And so I've used it a little bit this year particularly, but normally it's leaf grow. And every time I plant a plant, I will work some of that into the soil where I'm planting. Not a whole lot, but it just continually helps to enrich the soil. And that bank has benefited over the years, because I've been working with this for many years now, from the mulch that it gets incorporated into the soil, because the worms and whatever do the job with that. That was solid clay, because it was the bank of a retention pond. So that was solid clay. But now it's much better soil. That's what I was using it for, because I felt that actually, they both add some nourishment. And those plants right in that area don't require a lot of fertilization. You don't want to fertilize those too heavily, because they'll grow too much at the expense of the flowers, okay? But I do find that as I'm planting, and if I put seeds into that area, because I'm going to put some zinnia plants in, but I'm going to put some seeds in that will come along a little later. And I will use some of that as I'm planting those. So that's the purpose of that. That is something that gets worked into the soil, and each time I plant something, that soil is a little better. Okay.
So it's to help with the clay soil, improve the quality of the overall soil.
That's right.
Okay, next question. You showed two types of fuchsia. One was the vermillionaire.
Yes.
What was the other one?
Oh, did I not tell you? I didn't, did I?
I think I missed it, and I think this person did as well.
I'm not sure that I said. This is almost one of my favorite plants. It blooms and blooms and blooms. The hummingbirds absolutely love it. It's Fuchsia Gartenmeister.
Oh, it's the Gartenmeister. Okay.
Gartenmeister. Gartenmeister. And it gets 2 to 2.5 feet tall. And it actually would appreciate a little protection from the very hottest afternoon sun. If you have a deck that's blazing hot without any shade at all, this may not be the plant for you. Okay, you need to go with the salvias. But this plant will grow with full morning sun and some shade in the afternoon. I actually have it where it gets a fair amount of sun in the afternoon, but it gets a little bit of relief. Some of the relief came from that big salvia that grew next to it. That's all it needs, you know. Okay, Fuchsia Gartenmeister. Totally top of my list. Now, this one that I showed you, the Fuchsia Vermillionaire, this one, it's not a fuchsia, it's a Cuphea. Cuphea. Sorry about that. The little flower is kind of insignificant, but oh my, the hummingbirds love it. They just love it. So it may not be as appealing to you, but it sure is appealing to them. It's hard for us to keep that little bugger in stock.
Yeah, I know my grandmother planted those next to her butterfly weed a couple of years ago and had tons of monarch butterflies and hummingbirds. All right, next question. Have you ever had an issue with Japanese beetles in your garden? Do you know how to deal with those, or is that like a David Yost question?
Well, no, I actually might not give you the same answer that David would give you.
Okay.
Because I'm very cautious about spraying or putting down chemicals. Many years ago, I put down powdery Oh, gee, money. I haven't thought about it now for a long time. Milky spore. Thank you. Milky spore. Okay, it's a powdery kind of thing. And you put it down either when the beetles are coming up or going back down. So I would treat that in maybe August or July. Okay, check the date on it. Okay, because it's been a long time since I did that. Powdery. What did I say? Milky spore. Milky spore. Okay, that's what I used. And for 20 years, I have not, and the whole neighborhood did it. This was a concerted effort. I'm not a part of an HOA, but I'm bordered by that. And so they got together and the whole neighborhood treated, and we don't have Japanese beetles. 20 years later, we don't have Japanese beetles. So that's my way of dealing with it, okay? And I highly recommend it. If you kill the grubs with a chemical, which you can, but somehow or other you always have to seem to keep doing that, then the milky spore won't work because it's got to have the beetles to get it and take it down and gets rid of them. That's my answer for Japanese beetles.
Okay.
I don't want a beetle trap in my garden because I don't want to attract them.
Okay, this is our last question, so we'll go ahead and take it. So we'll just go a couple minutes over. So anybody who has to jump off, thank you, and we'll send out the recording and the coupon tomorrow. So Peg, the last question is, your plants appear to have no mildew. How do you deal with that?
Well, these, oh, you mean in my garden? I was about to say these came out of the nursery.
No, not those plants. Plants in your actual garden. The question is, how do you deal with your mildew? Your plants appear to have none.
Well, and I don't have many problems with mildew. Occasionally, I will get a phlox that has some, or a monarda that has some, and usually I just cut that away, and then I don't have a problem with it. As I said, I very recommend very judicious use of chemicals. If you've got a problem you need a solution to, do visit our plant clinic and find out exactly what to use, and be careful with the rest of your environment, okay? Because I don't want to kill my insects, my beneficials. And the more insects I have, the more those beneficials are going to come and help me get rid of them, okay? Powdery mildew, I realize it's not one of those, but I really have very few problems to that degree. Maybe problems in my garden are more drainage issues, which has shifted over a period of time. So thank goodness I don't have a lot of problems with mildew. And giving them space, not doing overhead watering, all those things help prevent it. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much, Peg. We're getting some nice comments. Thank you to everybody who's written in. I appreciate it. All righty. So a couple of reminders before we wrap up for today. This is our last noon class for about the next month to 6 weeks. We're going to kind of see what the schedule is and see if we're able to get some people maybe back in person. Fingers crossed. I can't make any promises, but hopefully soon we'll have people back in our stores. We will continue our online classes. Just look for those to come back out starting in June. We should have a schedule up. So everybody, please enjoy your May. We will hopefully be getting out some surveys so that we can hear from you and hear what you are interested in. That will come just through our regular email system. So keep an eye out for that as well. And then of course, we'll be sending out the recording tomorrow. So once again, thank you everybody. Have a great month of May. And David will be continuing his plant clinics. So to anybody who does those, we have our next one this Thursday. So just keep an eye out for those. And everybody have a good day. Peg, anything you want to wrap up with before we?
No, just get out there and enjoy now. I think our frost period is over. We've got a good rain into the ground. It's perfect time to plant. And I started dismantling my early spring things yesterday and putting in all of these beauties for my hummingbirds. So 'tis the season. Grab your hat, grab your gloves, and enjoy.
All right. Thank you all so much. And we'll look forward to seeing you all back for either David's plant clinics or back for our regular classes in June. And maybe sometime coming up soon back in the store. So everybody have a great day.
Thank you.